Can you hear me now? You can? Okay. Apparently it was turned off, probably from Claire. Yeah, my cat like freaked out. I was in the shower and then she was just like, nothing was beside her, no one was near her. It was just like, what the hell? She wouldn't stop freaking out. So I had to quickly get out and then I had to lay with her on my bed to calm her down. I was scared she's gonna have a heart attack. Something messed with her and it's like, wow. So that's what I was dealing with. She's okay now. Like that was weird. I've never heard her act like that before in my life. Ever. Daily. Aliens. Ah, shit. That's weird. That just Yeah, like something spooked her. Exactly. It was so strange. I've never heard her cry like that. So I was in the shower. I'm like peeking out the curtain. I'm like, it's okay. I'm coming out. Okay. I'm like, okay, okay, okay. I'm going. I'm trying to get everything in my hair. That's why my hair's so wet. No makeup on, nothing. I was just like, okay, I gotta do this. Yeah, that's all I can think of is something spooked her. All right. Hey, Brittany. Yeah, and I forgot to put the photos on the community um section. Sorry, I will do that. All right, we're on chapter 13. And this one's called Compliments of Jax. 5 months after the murder of Elizabeth Short, Bugsy Siegel flew from Los Angeles to Los Angeles. Huh? He flew from Los Angeles. Oh my God, I'm an idiot. He flew from Las Vegas to Los Angeles. Oh, this is a different cat. Claire's fine now. She's eating her treat. She's eating hard food. So I don't know what that was about. This one I don't know. Just got really scared. So, after 5 months after the murder of Elizabeth Short, Bugsy Siegel flew from Las Vegas to Los Angeles and was shot to death in the living room of his Morris Beverly Hills mansion on Friday evening, June 20th, 1947. I gotta stop biting my tongue in my sleep. Hurts. Although he was spending most of his time in Vegas, Siegel frequently visited LA to raise cash for his Flamingo Hotel project, which had gone several million dollars over budget. Bugsy had viewed Nevada on an oasis within the United States judicial system, where race wires, prostitution, and gambling operations were legal, and he dreamed of moving his syndicate empire to Vegas and making untold millions within the borders of legitimacy. That Flamingo dream had been hijacked from his old syndicate associate Billy Wilkerson, who had initiated the Vegas venture in 1945 when he purchased the land and commissioned the architectural concept. Siegel had been brought in as a partner when Wilkerson needed additional financing, but Bugsy became obsessive about the Flamingo project and aced Wilkerson out, threatening to kill him if he didn't back out quietly. Wilkerson fled to Paris and remained in hiding until the news of Bugsy's assassination. Bugsy just sounds like a crazy bastard. Yeah, here's an article. Oops, I'll have to put that in the community tab. One of his Flamingo associates, Mo Sedway, recalls Siegel exclaiming, Mo, we're going to take this land. and we're going to build the goddamnest biggest hotel and casino you ever saw. I can see it now. Ben Siegel's Flamingo. That's what I'm going to call it. I'm going to have a garden and a big pool and a first-class hotel. We're going to make Reno look like Whistle Stop. But from the beginning, things started coming up snake eyes. In 1946, there were still wartime shortages of construction material. Siegel was paying a minimum to obtain what he needed, and thieves were stealing the precious building supplies at night. In September, rains pounded down for days, flooding and reflooding the building site, and construction snafus were driving Bugsy up the wall. Deciding that the aisles in the hotel's kitchen pantry were too narrow, he had them reconstructed at a cost of $30,000, the equivalent of $200,000 by today's standards. Walls that were found to block views were torn down, and rebuilt with massive windows. When a heavy beam in the private penthouse, which was to be Bugsy's and Virginia's Hills love nest, was found to be only 5 feet 10 inches above the floor. Bugsy Siegel had one of his paroxysms. I don't even know what that is. After pistol whipping the foreman, Bugsy literally raised the roof at an additional cost of $22,500. Importing the finest marble from Italy and insisting on the choicest hardwood and gilded accessories, Bugsy's obsession to build the most luxurious hotel and casino in Las Vegas led to giant overruns in costs, right? The construction budget was originally 1.5 million, but by the end of September 1946, the project had cost more than 3.5 million and costs were still skyrocketing. He later raised additional cash from Meyer Lansky and Lucky Luciano. The syndicate bosses became increasingly skeptical about the venture. When Lansky visited the project in the fall of 1946, he began to realize that Bugsy was building a gilded marble palace out in the sagebrush. Construction costs continued to soar. Siegel's bank account began to tumble and checks began to bounce. A check for $150,000 to contractor Del E. Webb was returned with the stamp insufficient funds. Desperate for cash in October 1946, Bugsy sold his interest in the Florentine Gardens for $100,000 to Barney Vandersteen, a friend of Mark Hansen. And in an effort to raise additional cash, he instigated a series of jewel robberies orchestrated by his syndicate henchman, Albert Louis Greenberg, and the McCadden gang. Al Greenberg ran narcotics traffic out of his Hollywood bar, Al Green's night spot at 1739 North McCadden, and had once been a bootlegger for the Bugs and Meyer mob before relocating to Hollywood when Siegel moved west. Al had met Elizabeth Short in 1944 when she was learning the B-girl trade with Lucille Varela. And in 1946, she was learning the B. I just read that. And in 1946, Elizabeth frequented Al Green's night spot, which became the center of operations for the jewelry thefts instigated by Siegel to raise cash for his Las Vegas gamble. The McCadden gang included Lewis and Marty Abrams, two alumni of Bugs and Meyer mob, and Al Greenberg's friend Jack Anderson Wilson, a giant 6-foot 4-inch strong armed thug who walked with a limp. The theft of more than 150,000 in jewels from a residence of 1220 Sunset Plaza Drive was pulled off by Greenberg on November 11, 1946. The jewels were fenced through Bugsy's cohort, Maurice Reingold, owner of a fashionable jewelry store next to Drucker's Barber Shop and Beverly Drive. Selling real estate holdings and borrowing additional funds from his friend George Raft, Bugsy promised Meyer Lansky and Lucky Luciano that the Flamingo would be open by Christmas of 1946. He missed it by one day. Hey, country girl, Brenda. Oh my God, I hate cankers. I keep getting, I don't even think they're cankers, unless they're homemade cankers. My last molar is like sharp. I keep fucking biting my tongue. Once it heals, it's like in my sleep every night. Not every night, but it's like once it starts to heal, like right now I'm kind of like it hurts. That's all. Oh, it's annoying. Great, now I lost my spots. There it is. Although the hotel wasn't ready to open, the showroom, restaurant, and casino opened on Tuesday, December 26th, with Jimmy Durante, singer Rose Marie, and Xavier Cugat's orchestra headlining the showroom. A number of Hollywood stars were scheduled to attend the grand opening. Two Lockheed, nope, two Lockheed Constellations had been chartered to fly in the celebrity guests who were to include Clark Gable, Lana Turner, Cary Grant, Joan Crawford, and Caesar Romano. It's crazy that all these actors and actresses were involved with Bugsy. Oh, Tsushima. I need something. Oh my God. Ah, just hurts. I know you can get those like what are they called? There's circle things you can get from the pharmacy, and you have to wait till your tongue is really dry on the spot that hurts, and then stick it on. And it's supposed to be a huge pain reliever. Yeah, I need to get them because I always have issues with cankers or whatever the hell these things are, bite marks. But heavy rains in Los Angeles granted the flights. Only Sonny Tufts showed up, having driven across the desert in his car. Recalling the opening night, Rosemary said, "The show was spectacular. Everything was great, but nobody came. The local cowboys weren't interested. We worked to 9 or 10 people a night for the rest of the 2 week engagement. During those 2 weeks, the casino at the Flamingo had more dealers than customers, and Bugsy became increasingly paranoid and violent. Accusing a dealer of cheating, Bugsy had to be restrained by his own bodyguards from killing him. Furious at a press agent for his bad publicity and referring to him as Bugsy, he chased him around the flamingo pool like a crazy man before striking him in the head repeatedly with the butt of his pistol. He's friggin' nuts. Westbrook Pegler had made some derogatory comments about Siegel in a syndicated column. When Bugsy spotted the columnist in the Flamingo Casino, he threatened to kill Pegler, and once again, his bodyguards had to restrain him. Totally. I was gonna say that. Should I put salt on it? Oh, okay, hurts. With 300,000 with a $300,000 loss in the first 10 days and growing cash crisis, Bugsy temporarily closed the Flamingo in the first week of January, and FBI files indicate that he flew to Los Angeles on Monday, January 6, 1947. When he arrived in LA, Bugsy was acting irrationally, according to Bernard Brudsky, private detective who worked for Siegel as a debt collector and managed Sherry's nightclub on the Sunset Strip. Compounding his financial problems, on January 5th, Governor Warren announced there was to be no more offshore gambling in California, and the SS Rex was impounded and all its gambling equipment dumped into the sea. At a meeting held at the Linden Drive Mansion, attended at Brutusky and Siegel's friend, Alan Smiley, there was a discussion that collecting various debts, sanities, throwing art objects against the wall, and stamping out lit cigarettes onto the carpet as he threatened to rub out all of his debtors. Ruditsky concluded that Siegel was in way over his head with that flamingo project and decided to stay away from him because he was acting a little crazy. Ruditsky also concluded that Virginia Hill was a nutcase. Virginia Hill was a nutcase. She'd have to be with Bugsy.
Hey mom, can you write on a piece of paper what your email for something?
Yeah.
Here.
I don't think this works. Hold on. Let me try it. Yeah, that one works. Can you get me the salt?
Hmm?
Can you get me the salt in the cupboard, please? Or something. Thank you. Thanks. It does burn. It's both gonna burn like hell. I don't care at this point. Screw it. I'm going for it. Ugh. That's fun. Huh. Still, I don't think I got it on the right spot.
You know,
Hmm?
on your phone, you might have got email.
What are you doing?
It's a chat thing. Someone talked to you.
I have an email.
You might get an email now. So
I don't have one. I don't have one, Leland. It says something about KJ's chin. That's about it. Okay, where the hell? Okay, no more offshore gambling. Rudetsky recalled that Bugsy started screaming obscenities, throwing art objects against the wall, and stamping our lit cigarettes. Okay, I did read that. Rudetsky also concluded that Virginia Hill was a nutcase, and he observed that they were both going off the deep end, especially when they were on drugs, which was becoming an increasing habit. He testified before the Kefeffer committee. Mr. Rudetsky says, I think she too is a psychopath. Senator Wiley said, who is a psychopath? Mr. Rudensky said, Virginia Hill. She called me one night and she said, you better get over here right away. I have trouble at the house. I went over there. There were 3 or 4 people in there that I didn't know. She was sitting there. All Smiley was there. There was a fellow by the name of Swifty Morgan there. They were having dinner. She was there in a bathing suit and had a gun in her hand. She said, I'm going to kill everybody in the house. The maid, the Chinese butler, and everybody, she said. They have been stealing and robbing me. Well, looking at the woman, when you see her, you know she is definitely a mental case. That was my opinion of her. I ain't doing earwax. Uh-uh. When Siegel returned to Los Angeles on Monday, January 6, 1947, he was on a desperate cash foray, and at about 10:30 a.m., Al Greenberg's McCadden gang robbed the Mocambo nightclub on the Sunset Strip, escaping with a small fortune in jewelry and more than 6,000 in weekend receipts. The jewelry had been put on display at the Mocambo by Siegel's friend Maurice Reingold, who had a history of frequent thefts and his heavily insured jewelry. The accountant, Elizabeth Koch, described the leader of the trio that robbed the Mocambo as a 45-year-old man with a felt hat who held the employees at gunpoint, saying, "Let's nobody be no heroes now," while a younger man who walked with a limp and was described as at least 6 feet 4 inches tall, swept the jewels out of the safe into a satchel. The leader in the felt hat was later identified as Al Greenberg. According to the FBI files, Siegel planned to stay in Los Angeles for several days and had purchased a TWA ticket for a flight to New York on January 14th, 1947, for a week's visit with Esta and his 2 children, who were living in an apartment at 88 Central Park West. But on the morning of January 14th, the FBI learned that Siegel had suddenly canceled his trip. Where are we, cool? Who challenges her? It was on January 9th, 1947, 3 days after the Macomb robbery, that Elizabeth Short returned to Los Angeles from San Diego and was dropped off by Red at the Biltmore Hotel before walking out of the Olive Street exit and vanishing that evening. It was on the morning of Tuesday, January 14th, that Bugsy canceled his flight to New York. Hmm. Sometime that night, Elizabeth Short was killed by being repeatedly struck on the head by a blunt metal instrument and having her face slashed open with a knife. Are they hinting here that Bugsy did this? Hey, Sean. Oh, I could so go for lasagna. On January 15th, the day Elizabeth's mutilated and bisected body was discovered on Norton Avenue, Bugsy made reservations at the Colonel House in Palm Springs, which was known to be a syndicate retreat. FBI reports established that Siegel planned to stay in Palm Springs for 10 days before returning to Las Vegas. On January 16th, the day after Elizabeth Short's body was discovered, an article in the Los Angeles Times disclosed that 4 suspects had been arrested on the evening of January 15th in connection with the Macombo robbery. The Times article stated, shuttled into a show up on the ninth floor of the Hall of Justice where Al Greenberg, 42, operator of cafe at 1735N McCadden Place, and Louis Abrams, 47, both ex-Sing Sing convicts, along with Marty Abrams, 50, the latter's brother, and Harry Burnow, 31, another younger thief, described by the Macombo accountant at 6 foot 4 inches tall, was not apprehended. What? Well, Al Greenberg was identified in a lineup as a Macombo thief who held the accountant at gunpoint. He was inexplicably released from custody for lack of evidence. Greenberg was subsequently involved in another jewel robbery connected with Maurice Reingold on October 2nd, 1947, when he broke into Beverly Hills apartment at Miss Samuel Jennis at the Grosvenor, I don't even know how to say that, at the Grosvenor Apartments at Charlieville Rodeo Drive. Held at gunpoint, Miss Jennis was beaten by Greenberg and forced to disclose location of her valuable jewelry, which had been sold to her by Maurice Reingold. She was robbed of more than $150,000 in fine diamond and emerald jewelry. When Miss Jennis identified Al Greenberg's mugshot as the gunman who robbed her, the Beverly Hills police discovered that Greenberg had suddenly left town. Well, yeah. I'm pretty sure it was just joking. The time Bugsy Siegel returned to Las Vegas on January 7th, he had secured another bundle of cash and supervised the completion of the 200-room luxury Flamingo Hotel, which reopened on March 1st. That's my birthday, March 1st. Once the hotel was opened along with the casino and showroom, the ledger slowly began to improve, but every day proved to be another desperate cash crunch. Many of the people who worked for Siegel at the time recalled that he was increasingly violent and out of control. When Siegel heard that Ray Cronzen, the desk clerk at the El Rancho Vegas, had referred to the Flamingo as a place run by gangsters. Oh shit. Bugsy exploded and pistol whipped the clerk into an unconscious, bloody pulp. Everywhere Bugsy goes, somebody is either murdered or has the shit beat out of them. This guy is insane. And apparently his girlfriend, Virginia, is just like him. Paul Price, Siegel's publicist, recalled, no one could tell which way Benny was going to flip. You had to be very careful what you said. Price observed that Bugsy and Virginia Hill were having violent arguments over the attention he was giving to Marie, the body McDonald. On May 17th, Virginia was heard screaming that Bugsy was a rotten murderer and he beat her severely. Suffering from a broken nose and numerous contusions, Virginia attempted suicide before being hospitalized. She subsequently flew to New York, where she had restorative surgery before flying to Paris on June 10th for what was termed an extended holiday. Yeah, I bet. Learning that Siegel's henchman, Al Greenberg, was in New York City, Beverly Hills Police Chief Quentin Andrews flew to New York and arrested Greenberg on July 18th, 1947, for the April 2nd robbery of Miss Jenness at the Grosvenor. Denying that he was involved in the jewel theft, Greenberg insisted he was staying at Siegel's Flamingo Hotel in Las Vegas from March 30th to April 5th. Benny Siegel will vouch for me, Greenberg stated. But 2 days later, Bugsy Siegel was dead. Both Maurice Reingold and Al Greenberg were indicted for the theft. However, when again Greenberg was inexplicably he was released. He was released. There is a book about Virginia Woolf. I have to read that. When Bugsy Siegel flew to Los Angeles on that fatal Friday, June 20th, 1947, for what would prove to be his last cash-raising venture, he was met at Mines Field by Al Smiley. According to Siegel's FBI profile, Smiley drove Bugsy in his powder blue Cadillac to the Linden Drive mansion, where they arrived at approximately 12:30 p.m. In the mid-afternoon, Smiley drove him to Drucker's Barbershop at 22 North Beverly Drive. After a haircut and a manicure, Siegel walked to the nearby office of attorney Joe Ross on South Beverly Drive, where, according to Ross, they discussed financial matters relating to the Flamingo. Ross said that Siegel was to meet somebody that night at a restaurant in Ocean Park to iron out a few financial arrangements. Returning from the attorney's office to Linden Drive mansion at about 6:30 p.m., Smiley and Siegel remained there for approximately 1 hour before driving to Ocean Park, where they dined at Jack's at the Beach, a mob-connected hideaway restaurant popular with the film colony. Managed by Sonny Myers, Jack's at the Beach was owned by Barney Vandersteen, Mark Hansen's friend who had purchased Siegel's interest in the Florentine Gardens. Vandersteen, who was also an investor in the El Rancho Vegas, owned the Pig and Whistle restaurant chain in Los Angeles and controlled several syndicate gambling establishments in Redondo Beach. Pig and Whistle doesn't sound too appetizing to me. Just saying. Hey, Deb. Okay, I can do that. Yeah. Uh, Hold on. Yeah. Yeah, Anna. Hey, Crystal. I don't know where the hell I left off. Oh, yes, the Pig and Whistle restaurant chain. Witnesses who had been dining at Jack's at the beach recalled that at one point Siegel left his table and joined a group at a booth in the rear corner where he was engaged in what appeared to be a business conversation. Shit. That's bloody mess. With Barney Vanderstein. Money and Bugsy then departed the restaurant at approximately 9:45 p.m. and drove to the Beverly Wilshire Hotel drugstore before returning to 810 Linden Drive at approximately 10:30 p.m. It was a policy of Jack's excuse me, at the beach to offer departing dinner guests a complimentary copy of the Los Angeles Times with the inserted note, "Good night. Sleep well," with the compliments of Jack's. After returning to the house, Bugsy pursued his complimentary newspaper as he sat on the living room sofa and conversed with Smiley. Although the front drapes were always drawn when Bugsy was home, it was a sultry summer night, and somebody had opened the windows and the drapes on the south side of the living room, which bordered the driveway of the neighboring home of Mr. and Mrs. Belousov at 808 and Linden Drive. I think we're heading out to the death of Bugsy, and I'm looking at a picture right now, which I'm assuming is him, and it's disgusting. Engaged in conversation, neither Smiley nor Bugsy heard the car that pulled up in front of the neighbor's house, nor did they hear the gunman as he stepped out of the car and casually walked up to the Bulof's driveway on to the wooden trellis bordering Bugsy's open living room windows. Quietly placing his 30-30 rapid-fire carbine on a notch of the wooden trellis, the gunman was a mere 15 feet from his target when he squeezed the trigger and rapidly fired off the entire clip. The first bullet smashed into the side of Bugsy's head and out of his left eye, clearly, because I can see that right now, which was plastered 14 feet away onto a door jamb. As his mangled head was thrown back against the sofa, the second shot hit his face and exited through the neck. Altogether, 9 shots were fired, 4 hit Bugsy, and 1 ripped through Smiley's coat as he dove to the floor. Bugsy Siegel's slick hair and attire became soaked with the blood that was gushing from his head and dripping onto the complimentary copy of the Los Angeles Times, which had fallen to the floor, along with the note, "Good night, sleep well," with the compliments of Jax. The following Saturday, and for weeks to come, Hollywood was abuzz with whodunit rumors, and Bugsy Siegel's murder and Drucker's barbershop was besieged with customers who were anxious to be brushed up on all the latest lowdown. Here is the photo. So it's pretty disgusting. I'll put that in my community tab. I remember going to Drucker's with Jeffy shortly after the murder and hearing all the in the know theories about who killed Bugsy Siegel and why. Meyer Lansky ordered the rub out because Benny was skimming off the flamingo tables. Mickey Cohen killed him so he could take over Bugsy's territory. Dragna killed Siegel because he hated him for muscling in on his operations. Frank Costello had him assassinated because the flamingo had gone too far over budget. So basically anybody could have done it. Drucker's customer and the barbers would repeat all the stories ad nauseum. But Harry Drucker didn't say a word. He just smiled his knowing smile. Drucker was discreet. It would be years before I learned the origins of Drucker's discretion. Harry's brother Jack had once been a member of the Bugs and Meyer mob, and Harry Drucker had once been Bugsy's barber at the Waldorf Astoria, where he had also been Lucky Luciano's and Frank Costello's barber. Harry Drucker could be trusted. He kept the secrets. When Siegel moved to California, he took Drucker with him and set up his bookie clip joint on Beverly Drive, where Bugsy had his special private barber chair. Through the years, Harry Drucker overheard a lot of conversations in that glass-end booth where Bugsy had his last haircut and manicure. But Drucker's secrets were like the bubbles in the La Brea tar pits. They took decades to surface. By the 1980s, Drucker had moved his barber shop, along with Bugsy's booth, to a new location behind a Wilshire Boulevard men's shop in Beverly Hills, where many celebrities and important people unknowingly had their haircut in Bugsy's booth, including Elvis Presley, Chief Justice Earl Warren, and President Ronald Reagan. Wow. Yeah, it was a hit for sure, Anna. We just don't know by who. I had never spoken to Drucker about Bugsy's sequel because it seemed improprietous. But one Saturday in the mid 1980s, after about 1,000 haircuts and my hair turning gray, I managed to turn the chit chat to the demise of Bugsy Siegel. In the course of a conversation, one of Drucker's Siegel secrets bubbled to the surface from the dark depths of LA's mob chronicles. Why did they kill Benny Siegel? I politely inquired. Because he was crazy, Drucker replied. But wasn't he always crazy? Not like those last months, Drucker said. Then it wasn't that he was skimming off the top and all those other stories. No, no, Drucker insisted. He became a certified nutcase, a danger to everyone, so they had to kill him. You mean Lansky and Luciano okayed it? No, the police okayed it, Drucker said. The police? Shit. They let Dragna kill him, Drucker said, as he reverted to his knowing smile. Do you want me to trim your eyebrows? Nice conversation, can you imagine? So the police ordered Bugsy dead, ordered the hit on Bugsy. Wow. Interesting. This is they're telling that. They're like, would you like your eyebrows trimmed? What the hell? In the brief investigation into the murder of Bugsy Siegel, the police never mentioned Jack Dragna as a possible subject, though he was known to have the means and the motive. Like the murder of Elizabeth Short, the Benjamin Bugsy Siegel case was stamped open and unsolved. In 1973, while being interviewed by Martin Gosch for the last testament of Lucky Luciano, Luciano revealed that Siegel had been murdered by Jack Dragna, and in 1987, Eddie Cannizzaro, Jack Dragna's former driver and bodyguard, made a deathbed confession to federal agents that he had been the gunman who shot Bugsy Siegel for his boss, the mafia capo of Los Angeles. Beverly Hills homicide detectives Les Zoller, who inherited the Siegel case in 1980, investigated Eddie Canizzaro's claims and verified that, indeed, Cannizzaro had been Dragna's driver and bodyguard, and the details in Canizzaro's confession were correct. Jack Dragna orchestrated it, stated Detective Zoller, who believed Dragna had the motive as well as the connections to murder Bugsy Siegel and get away with it. Increasingly psychopathic, Bugsy had become an alarming liability to the syndicate as well as to the friends of the underworld at City Hall. Knowing he would never be named as a suspect or brought in for questioning, it was Jack Dragna who had Bugsy Siegel murdered 5 months after the Black Dahlia's body had been discovered in the weeds near Dragna's home. So was it Dragna that killed her too then? Yeah, Anna. Was Bugsy Siegel the demented killer who had slashed open Elizabeth Short's face from ear to ear, pistol whipped her, carved the letter D into her flesh, and had the bisected remains displayed in the proximity of Dragna's backyard? The FBI reports, which refer to Bugsy as insane, indicate that he was a pathological killer capable of committing such an act, and he also had the opportunity. But why? Yeah, exactly. But what was the motive? Why would Elizabeth Short have become a grim casualty of the mob warfare being waged on the streets of Los Angeles? In 1952, a Los Angeles Times reporter asked Detective Harry Hansen what he thought had happened to the psychopath who had murdered the Black Dahlia and why he had never struck again. Hansen's one-word response was dead. Hear my cat snoring? It's Claire. Having a good sleep? Yeah. Just eating dinner? Whew. I had what did I have for dinner? I had barbecued pork chops with fried mushrooms and some fried water chestnuts on it. And corn, but I had like those little baby corns. They're so good. Yeah, I agree, Sobs. Chapter 14, The Control Question. Perhaps it was only appropriate that the Wicked Witch of the West actress Margaret Hamilton handed out diplomas to the graduating class of Beverly Hills High School in 1949. Following graduation, some of my affluent classmates fell under a dark spell. Many who survived the Korean War were confounded by bad luck, bad health, bad marriages, bad attitudes, or bad drugs. Perhaps the worst spell of all we cast on my friend Manny Robinson, Edward G. Robertson's son, who succumbed to all of those above at an early age. It was though Manny and I met Arthur James at the Holiday House in Malibu. Owned by prominent artist Gerald Murphy and his wife Sarah, the Holiday House stood on the cliffs overlooking the Pacific Ocean and became a hideaway for Hollywood celebrities who didn't want to be seen in public with the wrong woman or the wrong man. Lana Turner, Johnny Stompantano, used to stay there, as did Marilyn Monroe upon occasion, with a young congressman from Boston named Jack Kennedy. Of course, we all knew that, right? No, Patty, shut it. No. From the pig farmer, you dink. Yeah, oh no, you didn't. Horsewife. One evening in the early 50s at Murphy Holiday House party, Manny Robinson, Arthur James, and I were discussing Hollywood lore. When James casually mentioned that he had known Elizabeth Short, what James had to say brought back flash frames of werewolf killer headlines, Uncle Vern and Bugsy's trunk. I don't understand this werewolf thing. The werewolf killer. I don't understand it. I guess I'm gonna have to keep reading to figure it out. James said he first met Elizabeth Short in Hollywood in the summer of 1994. He spotted her in a bar he frequented off Hollywood Boulevard, and she had an inner quality that he found intriguing. After he had drawn several sketches of her, they soon became friends. At the time, James was a struggling artist and managed several Hollywood rooming houses owned by Mark Hansen, the same Mark Hansen of Florentine Gardens fame. James recalled arranging for Elizabeth to stay at one of Hansen's rooming houses near Hollywood Boulevard and Van Ness, where James painted several oil portraits. My tongue is bugging me, okay? So these portraits of her. Portraits. Recalling that Elizabeth had suddenly left town toward the end of 1944, James said that he totally lost track of her until the summer of 1946 when he returned to Hollywood and stayed at Hansen's place on Carlos. Describing Hansen as some kind of what? Oh, a control freak. James said that during the war, the city was flooded with servicemen on leave looking for dates, and Hansen would recruit pretty girls to work the Florentine Gardens, and several of his downtown dance halls made sure the boys in uniform had a good time and spent all their furlough dough. According to James, Hansen would allow the girls to be perceived. According to James, Hansen would allow the girls he perceived as having special qualities to stay at his place on Carlos, and Hansen reserved them for special customers in the Hollywood crowd. James said some big shot had taken a fancy to Elizabeth and gotten her pregnant. Really? That was another rumor. Bigfoot, Bugs Bunny portraits and shit. So James said some big shot had taken a fancy to Elizabeth and gotten her pregnant, and Hanson had tried to set her up with an abortionist. Instead, she fled to San Diego. The last time James said he saw her was several days before she left the city, and he had heard that the big shot was Norman Chandler, heir to the Chandler dynasty. James recalled that he hadn't heard from Elizabeth again or known what happened to her until he recognized her picture in the paper and read the gruesome stories. Is that like why maybe she was murdered because she was pregnant? That's a pretty lame ass excuse, if you ask me. We brought bacon. I said no. My wife was like that. I told her. She said no. And she said, "Okay, go and order." I initially passed off what James said as booze blather. However, in thinking about it later, what James had said fit together with several pieces of the Black Dahlia puzzle. If Elizabeth was pregnant at the time she was murdered, it changed the whole concept of the crime, the motive, the MO, the suspects. Could the heir to the Chandler dynasty have been the big shot who took a fancy to the Black Dahlia and gotten her pregnant? I have no idea who this Chandler dude is. Yeah, it is lame, but it is the best. Yeah. After reconsidering what Arthur James had told me, I was determined to speak with him further about Elizabeth Short. But the next time I saw Arthur James, he was quite sober, and when I brought up the Black Dahlia topic, he was coldly evasive and obviously did not want to talk about it. Years later, I learned why sobriety may have brought about discretion. James had a rap sheet and a white slavery a test record relating to Elizabeth Short. In John Gilmore's book, Severed, the true story of the Black Dahlia murder, Gilmore discusses Arthur James' relationship with Elizabeth Short and his trip to Phoenix, Arizona, with her in November 1944, where he was arrested for transporting a minor across the border and spent time in jail. Elizabeth avoided arrest and briefly returned to Hollywood before heading back to Medford in mid-December. Really? Canadian bacon. Yeah, it's just ham. That's all it is. According to Administrative Vice Officer Vincent Carter, it was common knowledge within the upper echelons of the LAPD that Norman Chandler was a womanizer who carefully guarded his private life from public scrutiny. As publisher of the Los Angeles Times, one of the things Norman Chandler insisted on was that the Chandler name and Chandler activities be kept out of the paper. Vince Cutter stated, a lot of what was not printed about Chandler was common knowledge in administrative vice in the upper echelons of the Los Angeles Police Department, a department of the city government in which Chandler always had an intense and close, if unusual, covert working relationship. I don't think so, Great Dane Mom. I don't believe it ever showed that she was pregnant. Not to my knowledge, but um, we're halfway through the book though. Oops. Although Norman Chandler wielded great power and controlled much of the political business and social strata of the city, he was a very private person. It was a fortune if she had that baby, it would go to, or if she had a child, it would go to the baby. I want to know if she was too. It's a shitty excuse, but I mean, that's the only thing I can think of. But to make her out like what they did to her body, I mean, being cut in nap and that smile forced upon her face, cut ear to ear? I don't know. Is that making an example of her for getting pregnant with a married man's baby? Like, don't do that or this will be you? It says she wasn't? Okay, thanks. He was always gracious and debonair gentleman in his public life, yet there was barriers that he placed around himself that were seldom crossed by associates, personal friends, or even members of his own family. He was secretive. Norman's polite and polished demeanor often concealed a privatized man of invisible self-will. In the 1960s, noted sculptor Jacques Lipchitz was commissioned to do a bronze bust of Norman Chandler that was to stand in the foyer of the Times building alongside the busts of his father and grandfather. Chandler traveled to Rome for the sitting, but Lipchitz had a difficult time depicting his subject. He struggled for days and weeks to capture Norman's inner quality, searching his face and engaging him in conversation in an effort to discover the essence of the man. Lipschitz became more and more frustrated and repeatedly complained, I cannot find Norman. I cannot find Norman. Wow. Increasingly annoyed and impatient with the sittings, Norman became restless, and his mind wandered to his own private thoughts. Without realizing it, his face began to reveal the inner man. Shouting, I found him, I have found him, Lipchitz quickly completed the sculpture that stands today in the foyer of the Times building. When the bronze bust was unveiled, Norman's friends and family found it disturbing. I was gonna say it's probably something awful. It was too harsh, too cold, almost sinister. They felt it didn't properly reflect the urban and sophisticated qualities of the heir to the Chandler dynasty. After Norman Chandler died in October of 1973, his wife Dorothy Buff Chandler remarked to a friend that in all the years of their marriage, she had never really reached him. She stated everyone loved him and nobody knew him. But according to Vance Carter, the intelligence units within the LAPD knew Norman Chandler quite well and made it their business to discover everything they could about the mogul who was their heir to the Chandler dynasty and wielded so much power over the city. Hi, you awake? Contrary to the popular opinion, there's no honor among thieves, Vince Carter observed, and the upper echelons of the LAPD made a deliberate effort to know a great deal about Norman's private life, and they knew more than he was ever aware of. Police criminologist, oh, the frig tongue work, criminologist Ray Pinker was ahead of his time in the art of electronic surveillance and was indicted in 1942 along with Chief Horrell for having the gangster squad place electronic surveillance in many of the key offices of City Hall, including the mayor's. Private Detective Fred Otash, at one time an LAPD officer on Ray Pinker's staff of surveillance experts, confided that Norman Chandler was among many of the city's leaders that Pinker had put under surveillance. Chief Horrell wanted to know everything that was going on with Norman Chandler, Otash stated. Chief Horrell and Assistant Chief Joe Reed were fully aware of Norman's womanizing and playboy lifestyle. Norman's marriage to Dorothy had been arranged by his father, Harry Chandler, the daughter of a wealthy and socially prominent Long Beach family. Dorothy was known to be an ambitious and strong-willed woman, but her father-in-law always believed a woman's place is in the home. I hate that. Oh, can I have a drink first? Okay, just. Oh, am I good? There's not one live I can do without her. Oh my gosh, it's funny. Right, later, Missy. Yeah, if it wasn't the reason, it would have been very coincidental. Was it because she was around the mob? She may have sadly died. Yeah. Are you gonna lay down? You're just so tired. Oops. Let me go lay down. It wasn't until Harry Chandler died in November 1944 that Dorothy's political and social ambitions were emancipated. Becoming active in the Los Angeles Times and its editorial policy, she built her own apartment on the top floor of the Times building at First Street and Broadway, where it was widely rumored that she was having an affair with an employee on the Times staff. Although the Chandlers had their own estate in Los Feliz, Dorothy spent most of her time at the Times building penthouse, and Norman spent most of his time at the suite at the California Club. Harry Chandler had been among the founders of the California Club, which is exclusive to the more powerful businessmen in the city. Located in downtown Los Angeles on 6th and Flower Streets, it had a convenient private rear entrance on Hope Street just behind the Biltmore Hotel. Before retiring from the LAPD and becoming an illustrated private investigator, Fred Otash had been ensconced in the California Club, where he kept the distinguished residents and power brokers of the city under surveillance for Ray Pinker and the Gangster Squad. According to Otash, it was at his California Club suite that Norman Chandler rendezvoused with women who were often brought there by his playboy friend, actor Arthur Lake, who was on Brenda Allen's A-list. Although Dorothy Chandler did not care for Lake because of his litigious lifestyle, Lake was one of the few people Norman was close to. They had been friends for many years, and Norman had been best man at Arthur Lake's wedding to Patricia Davies Van Clyde, who was said to be the niece of actress Marion Davies. Hmm. Did you know that? I didn't know that. Your dogs are snoring. Arthur Lake had first met Elizabeth Short in 1994 at the Hollywood Canteen. Both of their names have been found in the Bowerdorf diary, and Lake admitted that he knew Elizabeth when he was brought in by the sheriff's department for questioning. If Arthur James was correct that Elizabeth Short had been pregnant when she was murdered, and the father of the unborn child was Norman Chandler, it would explain the extraordinary efforts by the Chandler faction at City Hall to cover up the secret circumstances of the horrendous crime. Yeah, see, that makes sense, but apparently it's not true. Having also fallen under the spell of the Wicked Witch of the West, I became mesmerized by the shallow history of Hollywood, and after graduating from high school, enrolled as a cinema major at USD, where I led a rather celluloid life before falling under the spell of British author, philosopher, and raconteur G.K. Chesterton. I found Chesterton to be an inspiration, an erudite voice to the wilderness of Hollywood and Vine. I devoured The Man Who Was Thursday and all of the Chesterton's Father Brown detective stories, in which the investigations goes beyond the crime and solves the confounding riddle of good and evil. Perhaps it was because of Chesterton that I changed my major to journalism and enrolled at Loyola University in Los Angeles. My stepfather had known Chesterton and proved to be a trove of Chesterton lore. Before the war, Jeff had known many people I admired, including Winston Churchill, Lowell Thomas, and Charles Chaplin. Jeff had a remark. Okay, I gotta vote that. You're gonna press buttons. No, no, no. It's okay. Stay there. There you go. Lay down. So his stepdad Jeff, had a remarkable, if bombastic wit, and I looked up to him as the endless fountain of Angelo anecdotes and knowledge. He was too cluttered for a monogram, but kept making films there until he died in August 1950. One of my mother's social friends had been a journalist, Ben Williamson, who worked for Henry Luke and was in charge of the Time Life office in Beverly Hills. Having worked for Luke since 1937, Ben seemed to know everybody. He could pick up the phone and could talk to Louis B. Mayer, Eleanor Roosevelt, Mickey Cohen, or William Randolph Hearst, even Howard Hughes. One night, Howard Hughes called Ben about a Time magazine cover story Ben was writing about Hughes and his flying boat, the Spruce Goose. Hughes asked Ben to meet him at the bungalow at the Beverly Hills Hotel, and it proved to be Hughes' last public interview. Ben was a poker player and would get into some of the big games. Up at Ben Hedged, Angelo Drive Castle were Jack Warner, Sam Goldwyn, Joe Shenick, Harry Cohen, and Mark Hellinger, with sometimes V for the pot. Ben recalled that Ben Hedge had always been chummy with the mom, going back to the days when he was a crime reporter in Chicago, and long before he wrote the screenplay for the classic gangster film Underworld. During his Hollywood years, he socialized with Bugsy Siegel, Alan Smiley, and Mickey Cohen, and in 1950, Hedge and Cohen staged a gala charity event at Slapsy Maxie's to raise money for the Jews in Palestine. Hatch gave an impassioned speech to the crowd of bookies and Hollywood dignitaries, and more than $200,000 was raised that evening for the cause. But somehow the money never arrived in Palestine. Mickey Cohen explained that the boat carrying the cash was torpedoed and sunk, but Ben Williamson and Hatch always suspected that the money went down in one of the big game pots up at Hatch Angelo Drive Castle. My mother and Ben Williamson were married in 1953, and perhaps suspecting I had more ink in my veins than celluloid, Ben would give me occasional Time Life research assignments relating to the film industry and LA history. Shh, what did you do? They may have thought she was pregnant. Yeah. What did you get all over this, Claire? What if they pay the coroner to say she wasn't pregnant when in fact she was? I mean, the cops were. Yeah, you know what? That could very well be it. I would believe it. Be honest. When he learned I was interested in the Black Dahlia case, he suggested that I speak to Aggie Underwood in the Herald, who Ben felt knew more about the case than anybody. Calling Aggie to set up an appointment, he also arranged for me to cull through the Herald Express newspaper morgue, so I'd arrive at my appointment well informed. It took me 2 afternoons to cull through all the Herald's Black Dahlia stories that had appeared in 1947. The crime had a haunting effect on me when I first read the newspaper coverage as a teenager, and rereading the Dahlia articles 7 years later was disquieting as well as fascinating. Reading the coverage of the crime in total within a condensed period of time was very different from reading the sensationalized coverage day by day as it occurred. I was able to get a more focused and objective viewpoint, and Big Jack Donahue's con game on the press and the public became very evident. I found that Arthur James had been interviewed by the Herald January 22nd, 1947, and had discussed his friendship with Elizabeth Short, but there was nary a word that she might have been pregnant. Only the story about her roommate, Lynn Martin, inferred that possibility. So they were talking about her pregnancy. And Ash can't tell her side of the story. Ben Hecht's article about Elizabeth Short's alleged lesbianism proved to be a ludicrous hoax, and in reading through the statements of people who were in touch with Elizabeth in those last days before she left the city, it became more and more apparent that she was afraid of something or someone. I came across a significant interview with a resident of Leimert Park and had escaped me back in 1947. That had escaped me back in 1947. It was headlined, "Police Seek Mysterious Thin Man in Black Dahlia Case." The article was dated January 24th, 1947, and concerned the police's house-to-house search and interrogation of the neighborhood around Norton Avenue. The questioning of neighborhood residents took place over a period of days, and the police investigators knocked on doors in an ever-widening circle from the site where the body was found. Nothing of significance was discovered until Lieutenant W.C. Wagoner and Officer R.T. Asdale knocked on the door of Mr. W.A. Johnson, who lived at 3815 Mullen Street, 6 blocks east of Norton. Johnson told the investigators that on Tuesday, January 14th, the day before the body was discovered, he had been cutting shrubs in his yard and had later driven over to the vacant lot on Norton to dump a bundle of cuttings at about 9 p.m. in the evening. As he slowed his car to stop, Johnson said he noticed a 1936 model sedan parked on the west side of Norton, directly opposite the fire plug, near where Miss Short's body was discovered on the following day. The top of the fire plug can be seen in the lower left of the photo. That's how many people now that they said they seen that sedan? Johnson noticed that the right door of the sedan was open. Standing near the car was a man gazing at the vacant lot. Johnson described him as approximately 45 years of age, no more than 5 feet 8 inches tall, thin build, wearing a tan top coat and a dark hat pulled low. Like that's everybody's experience that's seen them. That makes sense too, Great Dane. Yeah, I don't know. There's so many theories, so many questions, and not enough answers. As Johnson stopped on the empty street and pulled to the curb, he said the man seemed startled and acted strangely. When Johnson took his bundle of cuttings out of his car and dumped them in the lot, the short, thin man crossed the street and walked slowly past Johnson's car, hands in pockets, as he scrutinized Johnson and then craned a look into his car. Noticing that the man was acting suspiciously and fearing that he may be a bandit, Mr. Johnson got into his car and drove away, then circled the block and returned to see what the man was doing. As he turned back down Norton, Johnson could spot the sedan in the beam of his headlights, and he noticed that the man had closed the open door and was sitting behind the wheel. When the man saw Johnson approaching, he sped away with grinding gears and burning tires, Johnson recalled. Was it the same 1936 or 1937 dark Ford sedan spotted on the following morning before dawn when the body was dumped in the lot at the same spot where the thin man had been gazing? If so, the location where the body was discovered had been calculated before the murder. Why didn't the guy go back and look? That's my question. Yeah. Well, Jack Dragnett's house was 3 short blocks east of Norton. Mr. Johnson's house was 6 blocks east. When Donahue's investigators were knocking on doors in an ever-widening circle from the site on Norton, what did the mafia boss of LA have to say when the police knocked on Capo di Capo's door? In the entirety of the newspapers, there was not a word about the proximity of Jack Dragnett's home to the location where the body was found. Yet Jack Dragnett's house was there. That's fucked up. While continuing my search through the history of the Black Dahlia case, the Herald Express newspaper morgue, I came upon coverage of Bugsy Siegel murder, and I noted that in all of the articles relating to Bugsy's murder, there was not one mention of the most obvious suspect, Jack Dragnett. That's because it was a cover-up from the fucking cops. There's a picture here of possessions found on Bugsy Siegel's body, so I'll put that in the community tab. Huh. Okay, so that's weird. So the gold key found near the steps of City Hall is identical to the one on Bugsy Siegel's keychain. And it is. And it says BS on it. And this says BS on it. What the fuck? What does that mean? One of the Herald stories included a photo of items found on Bugsy's body, which included a gold keychain. Linked to the keychain was a solid gold hypodermic needle, which had been a gift from Virginia Hill, and a gold key to the house on Linden with Bugsy's initials on it. And that's this one here. But this key was found on the steps of City Hall. But yet, it's right here in the items that was found on his body. I'll put the pictures in the candy cab, I swear. A separate article that appeared on July 2nd, 1947, revealed that several days following Bugsy's murder, a gold key with Bugsy's initials on it was found on the sidewalk on Temple Street, close to the entrance to City Hall, and it matched the one on Bugsy's keychain. The honest citizen who found it, Herbert Michael, at 346 North Vermont Avenue, turned the key over to the police department, who could not explain how it got there. I wondered if Uncle Vern had accidentally dropped it on a mission to City Hall. I don't know. Drugs, maybe? Was he yeah, I don't know. After absorbing all that had been put to ink on the Black Dahlia case and stored in the Herald Express newspaper morgue, I felt I was ready for my meeting with Aggie, who I had been warned was quite formidable. But the scheduled meeting was canceled and rescheduled again, canceled and rescheduled a number of times until I realized that she either one was just too busy, two didn't really want to discuss the Dahlia case, or three needed time to review it prior to our discussion. I figured it was two, that she didn't want to discuss the Dahlia case. Back in those days, Life's magazine weekly edition was locked down and put to bed by 4 p.m. on Sunday afternoon. My mother frequently gave lockdown soirees for Ben's staff and literary friends, which sometimes included Adele Rogers St. John, Robert Benchley, Dorothy Parker, and Nunnally Johnson. Ben Hecht would occasionally show up, and I made a point of being there one Sunday when I heard he was going to attend. Being innately withdrawn is a big handicap for a would-be investigative journalist. Asking personal and interrogatory questions has always been very difficult for me, and only an excruciating desire for the facts can get me to stick my quivering nose into somebody else's business. On those occasions, I find I have to invent a person who isn't me. I can sustain the invention and become a pale version of Joe Friday for about 20 minutes before lapsing into a stuttering Inspector Clouseau. Ben Hetch was a real challenge. He had a cold, penetrating gaze that I found unnerving. Joe Friday lasted about 30 seconds. I found your piece in the Herald on the Black Dahlia quite interesting. Did you? But I found it strange. You said she was murdered by a lesbian. Then at the end, I didn't write it. Oh, Fowler wrote it. Oh, I wrote the end. Oh, who was the man? The man? The man who killed her. You said at the end it was a man who had killed her, a man you could identify. You don't want to know. At the time, I assumed Hetch was referring to Gene Fowler, Will Fowler's father. As the writer of the article, both Hetch and Gene Fowler had worked for Hearst in the old days, and I knew they were close friends. And in rereading the Hetch piece years later, it became apparent that the article was indeed written by Gene Fowler's pseudo-Barrymore-esque satire style, except for the end, which was pure Hetch. Both Hetch and Fowler had become prominent, wealthy, and successful writers since their Hearst newspaper days, and had no motive in writing a misleading junk piece for the Herald, unless it was a favor for old man Hearst. But why would Hearst want them to write such a convoluted, misleading story? This piece of the Black Dahlia puzzle didn't seem to fit with anything until years later, when the piece fell into place in the mid-Atlantic, where I finally had my interview with Aggie Underwood. By 1962, Ben Williamson had become the national news editor for Times Magazine, and he and my mother moved to New York City. I've been working at Samuel Goldwyn Studios on the Loretta Young television show, and during the show's hiatus, I was on my way to Europe for a holiday. I had a ticket for a bunk in tourist class on the Queen Mary. Wow. And Ben and my mother were putting me up at their Fifth Avenue apartment under the sailing date. This guy's like lived like the best life. I swear he's wow. Now my dog's snoring. My Black Dahlia puzzle box had been stored away for years until my mother gave one of her parties during my stay, and Aggie Underwood was one of the guests. If she knew okay, if his mother knew Aggie Underwood, why the fuck didn't he just get an interview with her through his mother? That's weird. I didn't remind Aggie of the appointment she had failed to keep almost a decade earlier, but I discovered that she too was sailing on the Queen Mary on her way to a holiday in Europe and the Greek islands. When the boat sailed, I spotted Aggie on the passenger list, but decided I wasn't going to bother her. Besides, she was in cabin class and I was down in the bowels of the ship in tourists. However, at mid Atlantic, I felt Joe Friday coming on, and I snuck into cabin class and found Aggie in the mermaid bar. While engaging her in holiday chit chat, I slowly steered the conversation into the Dahlia latitudes. Perhaps it was because Hearst had died and she was safely in the mid Atlantic that Aggie felt free to talk about the Black Dahlia case. Ooh, so she gave it up. Oh, yeah, most definitely. Aggie said that she had always believed there was a connection between the murder of Georgette Bauerdorf and Elizabeth Short, and she had been totally mystified when the boss ordered her off both the Bauerdorf and Dahlia case. She said that she sat at her desk in the city room and did her knitting for several days, neither answering the phone nor speaking to anyone in a silent protest. She said she had intended to leave the Herald when she suddenly bumped upstairs to the city's editor's desk. Later, she learned that it had to do with the Arthur Lake connection. Aggie recalled that she had learned from contacts at the sheriff's department that both Arthur Lake and Elizabeth Short had been mentioned in the Bauerdorf girl's diary, and Lake had been brought in for questioning. After the Black Dahlia murder and the mailing of the contents of Elizabeth Short's purse to the Examiner, she learned that Arthur Lake's phone number had been found in Elizabeth's address book. Aggie said that she knew that Arthur Lake had married the niece of Hearst's mistress, actress Marion Davies, but she didn't know until some years later that Lake's wife, Patricia Davies, Van Clyde, wasn't Marion Davies' niece. Patricia was the illegitimate daughter of William Randolph Hearst. Shit. And his longtime paramour, Marion Davies. Hearst wanted no Draculian shadows of sensationalism cast across his children or his children's children. The boss determined there were to be no scandals involving Arthur Lake. Aggie said that though she couldn't write about the Bauerdorf Dahlia connection, she had followed the Dahlia investigation through the years and concluded that the case had been controlled and covered up by City Hall. Did you ever hear that Elizabeth Short was pregnant? He asked. I need you to move your widow stinky. That was something I heard from the beginning, down in the squad room, Aggie said. What is the control question? It could have been. I knew Harry Hansen pretty well, but he wouldn't talk about it. That was a yes, as far as I was concerned. So she was pregnant. Aggie recalled that another officer involved in the case told her there was a crazy underworld abortionist involved, and Hansen brought him in for questioning several times and was pressing for an indictment, but Chief Horrell wanted to squash it. According to Aggie, the doctor died suddenly at his home in Pasadena. Whoa. His death was said to be a suicide, Aggie recalled. Imagine that. Do you think the cops killed him? He asked. I'm going to stick to my knitting on that one, Aggie replied. Wow. I didn't know that either. So they were gonna bury the story, and the lady had it every and anyone but yeah. So Arthur Lake married the niece of Hearst mistress, actress Marion Davies. But she didn't know until some years later that Lake's wife, Patricia Davies, wasn't Marion Davies' niece. Patricia was the illegitimate daughter of William Randolph Hearst and his longtime paramour, Marion Davies. So the Bowdorf and Dahlia were connected. That's crazy. So it's saying that she was pregnant and that there was a crazy underworld abortionist involved. I mean, I think we just got our answer. And then this crazy abortionist all of a sudden committed suicide. Yeah. So it was a doctor. It was an abortionist doing illegal abortions. The fuck? Yeah. And the person, this crazy ass underworld abortionist, apparently committed suicide. Yeah, right. So this Aggie Underwood, Underwood, she's a reporter, and she's like, that was something that she had heard about like, did you ever hear that Elizabeth Short was pregnant? She said that was something I've always heard from the beginning down in the squad room. And then she says, then he says, was that a controlled question? She said it could have been. I knew Harry Hansen pretty well, but he wouldn't talk about it. So that's a yes for as far as I was concerned. And another officer involved in the case told her there was a crazy underworld abortionist involved. Hansen brought him in for questioning several times and was pressing for indictment, but Chief Horrell wanted to squash it. According to Eggy, the doctor died suddenly at his home in Pasadena. His death was said to be a suicide. So he asks, do you think the cops killed him? She says, I'm going to stick to my knitting on that one. What the fuck? Like, everybody's involved in this. Was a surgeon. Yeah. This crazy underworldly fucking abortionist. So instead of exposing him for what he had done, they make it look like the cops make it look like a suicide. What the fuck? This is crazy. Makes more sense though from what I was thinking at the beginning of this damn book. Jesus, so she was freaking pregnant. I feel like sick, kind of. I feel sad. I feel like they all should be in prison. You know what I mean? Like, this is beyond just a girl being murdered. I'm just gonna put these pages together because I kind of want to revert back to it. It is crazy and it is unreal and it's just, but it has to be plausible. It has to be true, right? Because we got Bugsy in there. Yeah, I feel like I already felt like shit for her, and he knew it was something bad, and it was going to be something bad, and we were going to learn more. Motherfucker. Like, it just makes me want to go into this book, take all these bastards, and punish them. Send them all in jail, see if they like it. I don't know. This is crazy. I need to get his other book. He's got, he's the author of The Last Days of Marilyn Monroe. And this book I really like, I enjoy it, and I believe it because it's the only one that actually has all the proof. Look at, so we're, that's how much we have left. Halfway through. Oh my God, I hate. Yeah, we're halfway through. Yeah, like everybody is saying like this guy Donald Wolf. It says that he's done what the police and the DA's office failed to do. He's come so close to solving a murder 60 years ago, brought Jack the Ripper savagery to Los Angeles. I hope so, Anna. Yeah, it does make sense why the torso. It was like because he was fucking crazy. So that would make sense. This crazy ass underworld abortionist. Of course he'd do it like that. It'd be easy way to abort your child, wouldn't it? To cut her in half, for fuck's sake. And then the smile. I'm wondering if he did that because he was crazy. And then they all covered it up and made it look like it was a suicide. So they wouldn't have to bring him to trial because cops were involved and the mob was involved and all these people, important people were involved. Celebrities were involved. So because of that, they killed the fucking doctor and then blame it on a suicide. It's like, oh, that's it. Case solved. What the hell? I don't know. This is crazy. Norman Chandler was the apparently the most powerful figure in Los Angeles at the time. I didn't even read the back of this, but it says with the aid of archival photos, news clippings, and investigative reports, the author Wolf documents the riveting, untold story that names the brutal murderer. The notorious mafia leader Benjamin Bugsy Siegel. And the motive was an unwanted pregnancy resulting from Short's involvement with the most powerful figure in Los Angeles, Norman Chandler. The Black Dahlia files were authoritative work on the murder that was drawn endless scrutiny but remained unsolved until now. All right, I think it's time to clean my heat vents. I'm glad I didn't read the book or read the parts in the back. Yeah. Rest in peace. Until when? What do you mean? So that, so what the fuck? They're saying Bugsy did it now? So it was all because of an unwanted. When did we find out who did it? It was the doctor, and the police covered it up, and then they made the doctor look like he committed suicide when they actually killed him. But then back here it says, yeah, it says the notorious mafia leader Bugsy Siegel, and the motive was an unwanted pregnancy. Hey, Benita. They just found out who did it. Well, when the hell does the book come out? 2006. Nope, 2005. I didn't know that. Jeez. Right. All right, I should go. I gotta clean up my Swiffer thing. I didn't do it yet. And every time the heat comes on, it's making me sneeze like crazy. So, and I gotta upload these photos. So I'm gonna do that on my community page. I'll do that like right now before I do anything else. Um, Tomorrow I'll be back. I'm gonna have Great Dane help me actually with tomorrow's subject, which will be Madame Lalaurie. Which should be pretty interesting. I've been reading up on it a little bit here and there. I think it'll be neat. All right, you guys have a great night. I'll be back tomorrow at 7. Bye.